Hi, we're going to start with a quick sound check. We're about to begin the webinar, so we just want to make sure that everybody can hear us. If you can't, please write in or just test your computer volume. We're going to start any minute now. Okay, sound is working, so that's good to hear. We have nobody remote. We're coming to you from our headquarters in New Hampshire. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Embroidery Stabilizers, the Hidden Heroes of Designs. My name is Alice Wolf. I'm Madeira's Manager of Education and Publications. And today we'd like to take a subject that is on every embroiderer's mind, or should be, and shine some light on this subject that can be a little bit less than exciting. Nancy Minnie is Madeira's Senior Marketing Coordinator and Backing Specialist, and she'll be leading us through all sorts of basic and not so basic information about the importance of your stabilizers. Nancy has been embroidering, testing, problem solving, making purchase suggestions here at Madeira for years, and is happy to share her hands-on knowledge with you today. Here are some things that you can expect to learn with us today. Nancy, at this point, I'm going to turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, Alice. A few more housekeeping things that I just want to let you know about. Please continue to write in your questions. While we're going through the webinar here, we'll try to answer as many, if not all of those questions as we go along. So go ahead and use that your chat or questions box to send those in. Additionally, there are some handouts that are available. So for any of those that want to print out the slides ahead of time and make notes on them, go ahead and go over to your handouts in your toolbox, and that can be printed out. And there's some other handouts there as well that you're going to find helpful. So today what we're going to cover is we're going to talk about the what's going to go into choosing the stabilizer, the importance of choosing quality over price, how the cutaway and tearaway differ. We're going to get into a little bit on performance wear, along with the backing that's on your mind. Probably most embroiderers are meeting the challenge of embroidering on performance wear, so we're going to talk about that as well, and how you can cut down on the time spent on experimenting. And hope you can stay with us through the duration. Somebody did ask about where the toolbar is. That's usually up on your upper right-hand corner. You'll see a little red arrow. If you kind of pull that out, you'll probably find your handouts there. Depends on how your computer's displaying it. So beyond fabric, what are your guiding factors? You're going to think about when it comes to a cutaway or a tearaway. You're going to choose those based on whether it's a stable fabric or an unstable fabric. I always like to give you kind of a heads up on what the difference is between a woven fabric and a knit fabric. And in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see some illustrations of fabric. They're kind of blown up so that you can see the differences between those. And the one on the very right bottom there, that's a woven fabric. It's a stable fabric, meaning if you go to pull on it, you're not going to feel a lot of stretch to that fabric. So a woven fabric is just what it sounds like, and very much like a basket. The threads are intertwined over and under each other on a horizontal and vertical way, in the way that they're constructed. And like I said, if you pull on the sides or the tops of this type of fabric, it should not stretch unless it has a stretchy textile in there, something like a lycra that would be stretchy. The only way it's going to stretch is if you pull it on the angles. On the other side, or to the left of that image, is a knit fabric, and that's basically a continuous thread that's intertwined in and out of itself, and that type of a fabric is very stretchy, no matter which way you pull on it. So if it's a stretchy fabric, then it's unstable. If it doesn't stretch, then it's a stable fabric. So when you're picking out your cutaway, you want to choose those for your unstable fabrics. And if your fabric is stable, a tearaway backing is the one, or stabilizer. You'll probably notice as I'm going through the presentation today, I'll use the word backing and stabilizer simultaneously or in place of each other. When it comes to what is a backing or stabilizer, they're actually the same thing. They're just called different things throughout the industry, and just wanted to kind of point that out up front.
I'm just going to interject here for 1 second and let everybody know that we are recording the webinar, and at the end we'll be able to send you a link to the recorded of the webinar and also a PDF. Someone asked if there was a printed version of this, and so you would be able to print out the slides if you prefer that way.
Yep, thank you. So additionally, beyond the actual, whether it's a stable or unstable fabric, you're going to look at what is the nature of the actual embroidery design. So we're going to talk about that today, and we're also going to talk about what is the end use of the product. So we're going to start with the characteristics of a design, just to show you the difference between, something that has a lot of stitches in it and maybe one that has the same amount of stitches but covers a much larger area. So over on the right-hand side, that pretty sunset design was stitched out completely, all fill. So that whole, 2-inch by 4-inch design that we have here has a lot of stitches in it, and the density is very tight. So something like this that we would call a heavy fill stitch needs a little more stability, so maybe a heavier weight backing. So depending on which type of fabric you're embroidering on it, you're going to choose a cutaway or tearaway, but you might go a little heavier because it needs a little more stability. On the other side, on the left side, the flowers that you see stitched out are stitched out in basic running stitches, tripled over. So if you're familiar with that, it's called the bean stitch, gives it a little more thickness to it. But that design on the left, say, is 12 inches by 12 inches, could literally have the same amount of stitches as the small design on the right side. However, the flowers are not going to need as much stability or backing. The backing doesn't have to be as heavy for this particular design because there's not a lot of stitches going into the same place. So beyond your fabrics, you want to choose your backings based on the design characteristics itself. How much stability does that design need? So here we're going to talk about just a little bit about the end product. So what does it mean, the end product? What is it going to be used for? Is it going to be washed over and over again? Is it going to hang up on the wall as a piece of art, or is it a bag, something that's just not going to be washed as much? So when it comes to picking out the backing for these particular end products, you could get away with a tearaway backing because, number one, on the bag, maybe the art that's put on a canvas type material, you could easily use a tearaway backing because it's not going to be washed, it's going to be hung up on the wall, or your bags generally aren't going to be washed as much. So when you're thinking about a tearaway backing, you want to remember that that has rayon in it most times, which is why it feels a little paper-like, and that's why you're able to tear it away, so that that tearaway backing, once it's washed, it's literally going to disintegrate over time, and there'll be no more stabilizer there left to take care or hold up the design itself on the garment. So on the other side, we have babies wear, some sportswear, caps and things like that that may actually wear out over time. You want to make sure you choose a cutaway for the most part because it's going to stay and endure the life of the garment itself.
Nancy, I'm going to interrupt again with a question that just came in. Someone wrote in that they tend to use cutaway for all left chest embroideries regardless of the fabric type. And this person is asking if you can use cutaway on woven fabrics as well.
Yes, that's actually a great question to bring in because I tend to stick with cutaway backings for most of the things that I do embroider here. Just because it's going to give you a little more stability. So absolutely, a cutaway on a lightly woven shirt, a dress shirt, is absolutely the right thing to use. You want to be, and we're going to get into it a little bit later, but you would just want to be careful that you're not choosing a tearaway for the ease of tearing it away, because yes, it tears away easy. It makes it so much easier, or quicker, I should say, to do the job, as opposed to picking up a pair of scissors or snips and carefully cutting it away. That tearaway backing is going to disappear, during the first few washes. Technically, all tearaway backings are wash away to some degree. Just reading a couple of questions there. We'll see if we can pick out a few here that we can address. Single layer cutaway or double. Most backings that you're going to choose, we're going to talk about your basic backings coming up. Using one piece is usually the best way to go. However, if you need to double up, there's certain stabilizers that will work a little better, and we'll get into those as well.
Nancy, you recently did a baby blanket. Someone's writing in about not wanting to have so much bulky backing or stabilizer on a baby's blanket. How would you approach that?
Yep, a tearaway can be used on that, but you might not be able to tear it away nice and cleanly depending on what the design is. A better one might be to use a cut wash away. So yes, you have to cut it away and there's a little bit left over, but the first time that baby blanket is washed, it completely disappears. So that's what I would use on that type of thing.
And by lightly woven, you mean lightly stretchy?
Not necessarily stretchy, but I would consider a dress shirt, even maybe an Oxford shirt that's a little bit heavier. That's a lightly woven fabric. And if you want to compare it to a heavy woven, now you're going to move over to canvas, heavy denims, corduroys, and things like that. That would be a little more heavier woven fabrics. The heavier the fabric is, the more tightly it's woven. Canvas is probably the best example, or really heavy-duty denim, because you could literally embroider with a tearaway backing, and if it washed away and there was nothing left, the garment itself is going to be able to support the design. And we're going to get into why you would always use a backing in just a little bit here. When it comes to quality versus quantity, all backings are not created equal. You do want to make sure that you're considering one over the other for the right reasons. A quality stabilizer has consistent fibers throughout, whether it's rolls or pre-cuts. Each piece that you pick up, you should see consistency like what you're seeing on the screen here. On the other side is more of an economical backing, and those fibers that are within there are inconsistent, so there might be some open pockets of, not quite as much backing in there, or you might have some strings, fibers that are in there as well. Economical backings have their uses. They are going to save you a little bit of money, but you want to make sure that you're considering all the aspects of going with an economical backing. Yes, they're going to be less expensive. However, you might find that you're going to have to use two pieces of an economical backing to achieve the same quality embroidery as you might with the same weight of a quality backing. So consider that when you are choosing your backings.
Nancy, with the wash away, are you supposed to remove the paper that is attached to it before embroidery?
So it sounds like you're talking about a cutaway wash away with a pressure sensitive adhesive on the back. There is cutaway backings that are like that. And yes, you're going to remove the paper because that's what has the adhesive underneath it. If you're talking about something else, go ahead and write in and we can try to clarify that up.
And one more question here. If you're working on this person has called it a fishing shirt, 100% polyester. I'm picturing a windbreaker that is not particularly stretchy, but it's very thin and slippery. And they're asking if a cutaway would be advised for that. It is a woven, but it is a very thin one.
So if it is a woven, if it's a woven polyester, then yes, it might have a little bit of stretch to it because it is polyester. I would go with a low profile cutaway backing on that. And we're actually going to talk about those a little bit coming up and you'll see what I mean. All right, so here backings are constantly evolving, and it used to be you would have your basic cutaways and basic tearaways, and you didn't have a lot of choices to pick from, unless it was tearaway, cutaway, or maybe the different types of weights. So what I would consider a basic cutaway or basic tearaway is that they come in black and white. They're non-woven stabilizers, meaning these are not made up of threads that are intertwined like a woven fabric. They're non-woven, and they're produced similar to, in a way, that paper is actually produced. And they, whether it's a cutaway or a tearaway, and these ounces will differ whether it's cutaway or tearaway, but they each are usually available in a lightweight, a medium weight, and a heavyweight. And remember, we talked a few slides ago about, you know, if it was an open area design like the flowers, or a condensed heavy fill area like the sunset, that is what you're going to use to help determine the weight of the backing or stabilizer when you go to choose it. Somebody wrote in a question just now, should you pre-shrink backings? Generally, a nice quality backing, or even those economical ones, you don't want a backing that's going to shrink. If you're using a backing or stabilizer that is going to shrink, then absolutely I would pre-wash it so that it's not going to pucker up the design. But most of your embroidery stabilizers are not going to shrink during the wash. Speaking of wash, so we're going to tell you when are you going to, we're going to talk about when should I move away from basic stabilizers. Our world around us is ever evolving, and that's true for our fabrics. And once the fabrics change or evolve into different types of fabric, aka hard to embroider on, then the stabilizer itself has to catch up. So certainly that has happened when it comes to the performance wear. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So as those new materials materialize, so do the stabilizers. When it comes to choosing these specialty backings, and even the basic ones, you do want to make sure that you're testing and experimenting. Don't throw away those garments that you had a mistake with. Make sure you're holding on to that material and trim them to a size that you can hoop and do your testing on. So never throw away those fabrics. Think of those as opportunities to do your testing and experimenting, or even just an example that you want to show the customer ahead of time, saying this is what it's going to look like. And most importantly, you do want to include at least one laundering cycle, meaning wash and dry, if you know the garment can take the drying as well, making sure that you're following suit to both the garment and the embroidery threads washing instructions. But including one of those laundering cycles is really going to save you a lot of time in the end, and repeat customers, especially if they were to take something home, hand it out, it goes through a laundering cycle, and it comes out looking all puckered and just doesn't look good because the wrong backing was chosen on that. That customer may or may not come back to you for their next job. And last but not least, you do want to consider all the alternatives that are out there when it comes to stabilizers, because there are a lot of them out there. So again, test and experiment with those. Just got one question here that I'll address. What type of stabilizer would work best for bath towels? Tearaway washaways are the best, although most tearaways will wash away eventually. The ones that are specifically wash away will remove easily and wash away quicker. Can you overstabilize or understabilize? Absolutely. If it was easy to just throw backing on there, and whether it's too much or too little, we probably wouldn't be having the webinar today. So we're going to go over, you know, what's going to happen if you use too much backing, what's going to happen if you use too little, or choose the wrong one.
Nancy, just a quick question. Would you think that a laminated cotton or oilcloth is sturdy enough that you would be able to use a tearaway, or which way would you go with that?
It sounds like it's a fabric that's very stable, so absolutely I think a tearaway or a tearaway washaway will work well on that. If you can use a cutaway, I would use it, but if it's preferable that it disappears completely, then absolutely I think that's going to work out well with the tearaway. So here we have an example of too much stabilizer. Hard to believe, but yes, you can use too much. And sometimes the reasoning for using too much is trying to fix maybe poor digitizing, or you simply want that design to look better because you don't have maybe the right stabilizer. So we have one here on black, one here on white, and they both have too much backing behind them. It's a common mistake to use two pieces of heavyweight cutaway. If you think about a 3-ounce cutaway and you start using two pieces, or if you're using 2.5 ounce and you're using two pieces, now you're up to 5 ounces or 6 ounces of backing behind a probably thin, slippery type material that we have here. So if it's under a dark garment, you might say, well, I can't see it, so it's not a big deal. But when that garment is put on a body and it's just kind of laying over it, you're going to see bulk behind there. So you kind of have a bulky looking bulk look underneath it, which is not going to be attractive worn on the person. On the other side, we have a white shirt, kind of similar material, and again, two pieces of a cutaway backing were used. And if this is on a body, you're going to see that white showing through. So each one of these are, you know, what you're going to consider a badge effect. And when it comes to these corporate designs put on the like a performance wear type shirt or a golf shirt or a PK, that's not going to look attractive. So there's stabilizers out there that are going to help that.
Nancy, the old flour sack towels are made from them. We have a question coming in. Heavy flour sack towels, which stabilizer would you recommend for that?
So again, it's a heavy fabric. It's not going to be too stretchy. So I would probably use either a cut wash away or a tear wash away. When it comes to embroidering on different types of fabric, again, you want to do your testing, but the design itself, you might want to keep it light and simple, and it's going to be able to support it easily with that tearaway backing. So just like you can over-stabilizer or use too much, you can under-stabilize as well. Or in this particular instance, we chose, it was under-stabilizer because we used a tearaway on the left and we used a cutaway backing on the right. And hopefully you're able to see this on your screens. When you're looking at the frog on the left-hand side, it was stitched out, same design, same fabric, but a medium tearaway backing was used. And here we have a stretchy fabric that has some bumps on it because it's the PK. In addition to it, the black outline stitches they just didn't fill in quite as well. Not only that, you can see the eyes and the fill area itself doesn't look quite as smooth as the one over on the right-hand side does. So not only does this not look good now because it didn't support it during the embroidery process itself, it's going to look even worse once it's been washed. On the right-hand side, we used the correct cutaway backing behind it, gave it great support. So you can see the black lines are standing up above and not sinking down in because the cutaway is actually supporting the garment. So it's not just supporting the garment maybe from going side to side, up and down, it's supporting it by holding it still and holding the thread where it needs to be. So this is just a great example of how using a tearaway, yeah, it was easy. I could tear it right around that frog. But the time it took to cut around the cutaway backing ensured that the design looks good walking out the door, and it's going to continue looking good after it's been washed a couple times.
Nancy, a question is coming in from someone asking about what you would suggest as the best type of backing for an unstructured cap or the popular dad hats, because their digitizer is telling them to use two pieces of 3-ounce cap backing. The person is also mentioning that it tends to get very thick and makes the design concave.
Yep, that makes sense. So generally, you should only have to use one piece of a tear. So cap backings are heavyweight tearaway backings, and you really should only have to use one. Your digitizer might be telling you to use two, in order to kind of fill in the space. So it really comes down to the hooping when it comes to caps themselves. We actually have another video. If you go to Madeira's YouTube page, we did a webinar on cap backing specific, so I'd go ahead and watch that when you do have a chance. But one thing that I'm told, or have experienced myself as well, is if you're embroidering on a cap and, you know, basically you're trying to create a flat surface for that embroidery machine to embroider on, it's really difficult on a round hoop. So you might want to try using longer pieces of backing in order to clamp it on that cap, the hoop itself, get it a little flatter, because that's where the challenge comes, is in getting that cap hooped correctly. So there's some help out there, help with that webinar as well in the hooping itself. So my advice would be to use one piece. Maybe you want to go up to a 3-ounce. Just 3-ounce tearaway backing, yeah. So one should do it. Maybe go a little longer, and make sure it's not too wide for your cap frame. If you need to trim it down a little bit, that might help you get it down a little flatter.
How about with the frogs? Was just one piece of cutaway used on the frog?
Yes. Yep. And it was actually a lightweight cutaway. We're going to talk about those low-profile cutaway backings that are available. It's a PK shirt. So it tends to be a little bit heavier than, say, your performance wear, polyester, golf shirts, and those types of things. But it wasn't a huge design. It's only about probably, 1.5 inch by 1 inch. It's not a very big design. So just one piece. One piece of tearaway was used on the left, and a one-piece low-profile cutaway was used on the right.
When you are trimming around a cutaway, how far away from the design should you be cutting?
You can actually getting as close to the edge of the design is always the best, but the challenge is not nicking the fabric itself. So when you're going to trim away the backing, you want to make sure as you're trimming you can see the fabric. And the way to do that is, obviously, you have the garment turned inside out, and hold the backing as you're trimming, not the garment. So hold the backing so you can see the shirt, and then trim as close as you can get. So that maybe is not exact, but if you're getting 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch around the edge, that's pretty good. If the garment's not too show-through, then you can leave it a little longer. Here we have terry cloth. I think I saw a few questions come around for that. And so here's a design that's kind of a watercolor type embroidery design of some blossoms, spring blossoms on a branch here. So on the left-hand side, both of these I used a cutaway, wash away backing. It's a nice low profile backing that literally you do have to trim it because it is a cutaway, but the first time it's washed, it's gone. The important thing that was done here was, because it was kind of a lofty terry cloth fabric, was I used the Easy Aqua Supreme topping on it in order to hold the stitches up on the right hand side. So this was an experiment that was done, worked out really well to show you the difference with and without the aqua. On the left-hand side, we didn't use it. Simply stitched that design out, put the aqua on the other side on that one, and these were put through a single laundering cycle, so they were washed and they were dried. Nothing was done to enhance the appearance of either one, but simply just by adding that topping on, it helped hold that the stitches on top of the design instead of sinking down inside.
And what do you mean by low profile backing?
That's a good question. Low profile means it's thin. So if you think of a 3-ounce lofty or thicker cutaway backing, you hold it in your hand, it almost feels squishy, or it feels somewhat like a lightweight felt. When it comes to stabilizers, that would be considered lofty. When you think of something that's very thin, almost paper-like, that's a low profile. So meaning it's not going to add bulk to the back of a embroidered garment. I do see a question that came through that's saying, Should you use tearaway in conjunction with cutaway on designs? Lots of embroiderers use cutaway and tearaway together. And I do believe the reason for that is to help hoop and help stabilize the design during the embroidery process. As long as you're putting the cutaway backing close to the garment and you're tearing away the tearaway backing first and then trimming the cutaway, that's going to work out fine, because now you have the cutaway still there. It's going to last through the life of the garment no matter how many times it's been washed. And the tearaway maybe helps hold it in place a little bit better and helps you hoop it. So that is a common practice that people do use. Would I ever use 2 layers of aqua topping? Absolutely. If I was embroidering on something ultra thick, so some of those really beautiful fleece like bathrobes and things like that are just really fluffy, and you want to put a design on that, absolutely. You can use 2 pieces of an aqua or water-soluble topping. And then somebody asked, is there ever a time that you wouldn't use a stabilizer in, for example, a wool felt? Does the wool felt need stabilizing? It does not need stabilizing for the design. However, if you're hooping the material and you're putting it on your machine, it's always best to have at least a lightweight tearaway backing on the back side of it to help it run smoothly on the machine itself. So when you go to put that hoop in your machine, the garment or the fabric is going to be running along the top of that the needle plate or that extension arm where the embroidery kind of happens. Whichever stabilizer you're using, it is going to help that move smoothly during the embroidery process. So to hoop or not to hoop, that is the question. And my answer to that is always hoop when possible. And the reason why is I did just kind of cover that a little bit, is you want to make sure it's going to slide nice and smoothly over the needle plate. If you get any kind of sticking, so if it's a garment that might kind of heat up, if it's nylon especially, it might get kind of warm, and you can actually lose your registration if that arm or that hoop is not moving nice and freely. When it comes to small items, obviously you can't hoop them. Your smallest hoop is not going to hoop a baby sock or even a regular sock. Dog collars, maybe the tip of the collar of a dress shirt, maybe it's the cuff of a dress shirt, or just some odd area on a garment that literally can't be hooped. You want to use a stick-on backing for those small or hard to hoop items.
Question coming in, someone is embroidering pre-cut pockets using clamps and is wondering if there is a way to make it tighter.
Well, there's a lot of different hoops out there, so it's hard to say exactly which one they're using. But you might want to consider using stick-on backing, so it's a pre-cut out pocket and it's being assembled after the fact. So you might want to consider, I find that the clamp hoops work well for the thicker items. If you're using a thin item, it's almost like you have to add a little extra material under there for it to clamp good. So try a stick-on backing. Basically what you do with a stick-on backing is you hoop it with the paper side up, and once you have it nicely hooped, whichever size hoop that pocket's going to fit in, or at least the design part big enough for that, you take that paper once it's hooped and you take it out, or you kind of score it and then just rip it off, and then now you have basically a hoop with a big area of stickiness. At that point, you can lay that pocket right in there, press it on, because it's a pressure-sensitive adhesive. The harder you press it on, the better it's going to stay, and it's going to hold nice and well during the embroidery process, at which point now you can just take it out. You can tear that sticky backing off, and it should come out really well.
Another question, and I'm not sure if this person has understood the difference of when to use one or the other, but has the impression that tearaway, or why even use tearaway if cutaway is the better choice? I think that you probably made the point already that there are specific times for one or the other.
Yep, absolutely. Can the design, maybe it's such a light design or small design, maybe it's only 1,000 stitches and it's just really small and it's going on a dress shirt or even, you know, PK or whatnot. If it's a light, open, airy stitch count, the design is going to be fine on that type of a fabric. Maybe the fabric is nice and heavy, like a denim or a canvas, and you just need something to hold it together while it's embroidering. That's when that tearaway backing works well. So when it comes to hooping, we just have a couple examples of here of what is considered good hooping. We kind of learn that over time. When you start, hooping is probably one of the most challenging things that you have to do. Not only do you have to hoop it correctly, you have to hoop it straight. You have to hoop it, you know, you have to mark your spots so you're getting them in the correct spot. So when you do hoop, well, we talked a little bit about why you do want to hoop if you can hoop. Not only is it best to hoop whatever you're embroidering on, when you do hoop, you're going to get the best embroidery in the end, meaning your design is going to look really good, and it's not going to shift around while you're embroidering it. So we have some pictures here. They're kind of extreme, just to show you a good example. On the left-hand side, it's been hooped too loosely, meaning that if you run your finger across that, that material is going to easily move and you're going to see it ripple. On the right-hand side is an example of good hooping, meaning that you can see that it's nice and tight. It has not been stretched in order to get it in there. If you're getting your sledgehammer or maybe your rubber mallet out to get that hoop to go down in, that means you're hooping too tight. When you go to hoop and you push it in and it basically falls in, then you know that your hoop is too loose. You want to tighten that up a little bit so that when you go to push that top hoop in, it kind of goes in somewhat easily with your hands. You should be able to press and you should be able to push it in with your hands, not the rubber mallet. Although sometimes when you're hitting it really hard, you kind of wish you had that. But do consider loosening up that bottom hoop when you go to hoop. I did see a question there before I go on to the performance where I see a question where somebody is saying that they're using a tearaway for terry towels. Absolutely, you can use a tearaway for terry towels. Depending on how big the design is, how heavily dense that design is, you might want to use a heavier one or a lightweight tearaway, because remember that all tearaway backings are going to wash away eventually. So if the design allows you to tear it away nice and cleanly, by all means, use a tearaway backing there. So the newest challenge on the embroidery industry is performance wear. So just want to explain to you a little bit about what performance wear is and what we consider performance wear, just so that we're all on the same page. You know, years ago, Under Armour and Nike and some of those branded goods came out with that thin, slippery material that, you know, Under Armour was intended to wear underneath things. But it's come to the point now where people wear this type of fabric going to the grocery store. They wear, you know, people have yoga pants that never make it to yoga. And, you know, at some point the term athleisure was kind of brought into it because the material, the garments are just so comfortable to wear that it's gotten huge. However, that being said, when you go to embroider on these types of products or fabrics, it's really hard because it is a thin, slippery fabric. It's hard to hoop. It's hard to get it to look good. However, we have some backings here, so we're talking about backings in particular. We have a couple of backings here that we'll talk about. They're both cutaway backings, and these are the backings that you want to use on this type of fabric. So not to get into the embroidering part on this too much, but you do want to keep things light when you're embroidering on this. So we actually have a webinar available on our Madeira's YouTube page, and we have a picture of it there on the lower right-hand corner, and it's called Embroidering on Super Stretchy Performance fabrics, Think Light. Myself and Rich Medcraft did that webinar. So if you're looking to go beyond the backing or the stabilizer on these fabrics, I encourage you to go watch that webinar as well. And that will give you some ideas on what needs to be done as far as the digitizing, the types of threads that work well, and so on for that fabric. So let's go ahead to the next slide and we'll talk about the backings that you want to use for this product. A couple of things that have come out. We have the Easy Cut Performance backing itself, and this is, unlike most backings, this is a woven stabilizer, and just like it sounds, it's actually woven threads that are much similar to a fabric, a woven fabric. And I'm going to use the word low profile because it's thin. It doesn't have a lot of bulk to it. Because it is a woven fabric, it actually adds extra stability to the knit fabric that you're going to embroider on. So this particular stabilizer works really well, and it does not add bulk to the back side of those performance wear garments. That being said, I would extend this out to your dress shirts, your golf shirts, your piqué shirts. This stabilizer itself can support designs as big as 7,000 to 8,000 stitches, depending on how much fill is in there, or even more. Because it is a low profile or thin backing, you can easily use 2 pieces of backing for this. You can get a little bit extra stability out of this particular stabilizer if you use 2 pieces and put them at 90-degree angles. So remember, I talked about if it's a woven fabric, you're only going to get a little stretch on the bias or the angles, the corners of this. If you were to put them at 90 degrees, you're getting a little more stability from this particular backing. Somebody did ask if you trim performance as close as well. Absolutely. You just want to make sure you're seeing the fabric. You hold the backing as you trim it, and you make sure you want to see the fabric as you're trimming it, so you can get it as close as you feel comfortable doing. That way you're not going to nick the fabric. Another low profile stabilizer is the Easy Web-On No-Show Mesh. This particular backing is a non-woven. It's 100% nylon, and it has an embossed texture to it. Sometimes it gives the appearance that it's a woven stabilizer, but it's not. It's just the embossed that makes it look that way. And again, it's low profile. Same thing, it holds about, or it can support. Somebody asked if this is moisture wicking apparel. Absolutely, that's what we're talking about. Some performance wear has been treated specifically to be moisture wicking, but there's a lot of the fabric itself, whether it's treated or not treated, it's thin, it's slippery, it's usually 100% polyester and very stretchy. So go ahead and use this backing for that as well. What's the difference between this and the cut performance? Mostly it's just that one's a woven backing and one's a non-woven backing. So it's really what you prefer to work with. They both work well. I've tested them both out, compared them to each other, and they create equally good designs in the end. We can take a few more questions here.
Would you want to touch on Standalone Lace? There have been a couple people that have
Sure.
written in about that.
Yep, absolutely. Standalone Lace is basically you're embroidering on a water-soluble stabilizer, so that when the backing or stabilizer is washed away, you have basically a lace thing on it. So you can either use a couple of layers of our Easy Aqua Supreme topping. It's a water-soluble topping, or it can be a stabilizer as well. There's also cutaway, wash away backings that work really well. That's my particular favorite to use for Standalone Lace. This one is a cutaway as well, so you embroider out the lace, you trim it very close to it, and you simply, either rinse it under running water, or you can throw it in a bucket of water and completely just washes away.
About Weblon, does that have to be pre-shrunk, and if yes, how much?
It does not need to be pre-shrunk.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
We're kind of checking on the questions as they come in. We're trying to intersperse Nancy's presentation with the questions. I just want to remind everybody that we will be answering all of them. So if you don't hear your question answered in real time, a Q&A will be emailed to everyone, so you don't have to worry about that. Also, someone asked about the other webinar on embroidering on performance wear that Nancy mentioned that she did with Rich Medcraft. You can find all of our webinars on our website, MadeiraUSA.com. You can also find them on YouTube. We have a Madeira page on YouTube, and there are other webinars that you might find interesting. Okay, I think at this point we will go over just kind of what we've learned. We won't take any more questions. Okay. So what we've learned today is choosing the right stabilizer for your project. I want to mention at this point we do have a website called easybacking.com. You can find a very, very detailed list of projects and the appropriate stabilizers for them on that website. Nancy's mentioned some of the new products on the market, the Performance and the Weblon. So if you're interested in tackling performance wear, I can't imagine at this point that everyone hasn't had a customer come in wanting something done on performance wear. So we have new options available for you. The results that you can expect from the choices you make, we tried not to scare anybody off with too many pictures of don't let this happen to your embroidery, but there is the badge effect that you're going to get if you use too heavy or too much stabilizer, and that seems to be probably the most common problem that we've heard that people come across, too much rather than too little. Conquering embroidering on performance wear. I would encourage anybody that is really struggling with that to take a look at the webinar that Nancy mentioned that is you can find either on MadeiraUSA.com or on YouTube. And then cutting down on the time to spent on experimenting. As Nancy mentioned, you're going to want to experiment, but obviously the more knowledge you have, the less time you're going to spend experimenting. Again, I'm going to mention that, no, I'm not. We're going to go into the special. I'm sorry. Let's look at what, Nancy, if you could explain what this is.
Sure. So thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us here for these few minutes. And to thank you, we just want to make sure that you're aware that if you're looking to try one of our backings, if you include one of our backing or that topping, that Easy Aqua Supreme water soluble topping, and your order total is $75 or more, we'll give you 12% off your order off of all the non-sale products there. So go ahead and write down this promotional code. We're going to follow up with an email. You're going to see that real shortly. That's going to have all the links. The recording of this is going to be up on the YouTube page shortly as well. And hope that we're able to help you out, and we'll get right on those questions for you. So anything that wasn't answered, we're going to get them right out to you real shortly.
Okay, questions are still coming in, but we're going to collect them all. Today's Wednesday. I would say by Friday, everyone will have a copy of the questions and answers. And I'd like to thank you, Nancy, between our slides and all of the questions that are going to be answered if they haven't already. I think we've covered a lot of ground today. For everyone that is still with us, if you have any lingering questions about which backing to use or feel the need for any follow-up information, any of Madeira's customer sales and support representatives are trained and ready to lend support. If you have an incredibly tricky question that one of them can't answer, it would be upgraded to Nancy, and then she would be able to help you as well. So if you're stuck on a problem, please don't hesitate to call us. I'm sure that we would be able to help. And again, as Nancy mentioned, our webinar is recorded. The recorded version, the printable version will be available to you. We'll send you those links before Friday. We've collected all your questions, and we'll be sending them to you. I'd like to, again, thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you for your time. We hope that we've helped, and we will be getting back to you. Take advantage of the special, and again, if you have any questions, please contact us, and we would be happy to help. Thank you.